What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett. In today's episode, I'm going to be offering my Week 11 preview and predictions for the important matchups this week. It's a big week for the SEC specifically, a little bit quieter everywhere else, but two key matchups in the SEC are going to determine, I think, college football playoff fates for two teams, and those teams especially, I think, being potentially the teams that lose these games, being knocked out of playoff contention. But before I get into this week, if you go and enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. But starting things out in what is really effectively a play-in game. Obviously, for the winner of this game, there's still two games left to play, but I'm talking about number 11, Alabama, at number 15, LSU. This is what I think is a must-win for both teams. I think especially for LSU, already sitting outside of that top 12, they need to win this game or else their season is effectively over. For Alabama, where they're ranked, seems to stipulate that they could maybe afford to lose, but if they lose this game, they're dropping. They're probably swapping places with LSU, in all honesty. And so this is a very vital game for both of these two teams. They already both have a couple of losses on their resume. And so what are some of the key areas to watch, though, in this game, which will be tomorrow at 7:30 Eastern Time on ABC? Well, for one, I think it's the turnovers. I mean, you always talk about, in football, winning the turnover battle. Both Alabama's Jalen Milroe and LSU's Garrett Nussmeier have struggled at times with turnovers. Milroe has 6 interceptions, but it seems like sometimes he falls into that in bigger moments. And he also has a couple of fumbles on the season as well. Nussmeier has thrown 9 interceptions, so both quarterbacks need to protect the ball. Alabama has done a really good job at taking the ball away. They're tied second in the SEC in interceptions with 11, while LSU has been the worst in the conference at creating interceptions with just 4 the whole season. Both teams are pretty kind of upper middle of the road with 9 forced fumbles this season, so this will be a key area to watch. Obviously, based on those numbers alone, it shows that Alabama does a better job of it, and Nussmeier already has thrown more interceptions this season. However, I think another key area to watch is LSU does have the number 2 passing offense. Alabama's a little bit more dynamic with their offense. LSU can pass the ball really well. However, they rank last in the SEC in rushing yards per game. So if Alabama is able to shut down Nussmeier and then wide receiver Kyron Lacey, will their rushing game be able to step up at all, or can they establish that early to create more opportunities for their passing offense later? That's a big question they're going to need to answer. Another key factor, though, is Brian Kelly has been perfect in Death Valley night games. He hasn't lost a game yet at LSU's Tiger Stadium, and so that is something also that shows that he's able to win these games. The team under his coaching has been able to rely on a passionate fan base, one of the best in college football. So I think that's an important factor as well, and I think that can determine a game that is a toss-up like this. I think LSU was able to do just enough in this one. I think they pull out the home win. Maybe it's a late touchdown to go ahead. Maybe it's a stop late. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe a go-ahead touchdown and stop in Alabama. But I think LSU is able to get a win. I think I'm going to go with Alabama. It's a small spread, but I'm going to go with Alabama covering. LSU 28, Alabama 27. So that is a big game. LSU bolsters their college football playoff chances, while Alabama probably takes a blow that might be a little bit too much to overcome. However, with teams like last week having 4 teams that ranked, I think, ahead of the Crimson Tide losing, that's always still a possibility. So they're not dead in the water yet, but it would be a big blow for their college football playoff chances. Either way it is. Another game, this one isn't so much a must-win for both teams, but staying in the SEC at 3:30 Eastern, you've got number 3 Georgia at number 16 Ole Miss. This is the Rebels' playoff chances, college football playoff chances on the line, while the Dogs look for another SEC road win. This is their 3rd chance to go on the road at a top 5 or top 10 at the time ranked team. Obviously, they went on the road to Tuscaloosa, nearly pulled off an amazing comeback win against Alabama, but just fell short, and then dominated early against Texas a couple of weeks ago. Their quarterback, Carson Beck, has underperformed this season, 17 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. A player who was a Heisman candidate. I wouldn't quite say front runner, but to some people he was. A Heisman candidate has really fallen on tough times this season. Meanwhile, Jackson Dart, the quarterback for Ole Miss, has kind of done the opposite. He's delivered. He has 3,200 passing yards, 21 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. Now, an important thing to note, the Georgia Bulldogs have had a pretty good pass defense. It hasn't quite ranked as high as they have in previous seasons, but they're number 26 nationally in passing defense, so that's a key area to watch. Another thing for Georgia, I think it's going to be really important to create turnovers, create short fields early. Georgia has proven this season, even with Beck and Trevor Etienne at running back, that it's a little bit tougher for them to drive down the field, especially early in games. So if this defense can create one or even a couple of turnovers, that could be huge for Georgia early. Now, outside of that Texas game, Georgia has also been a very second half team. They've been very strong in the second half of games outside of that quick start, going up 23-0 on the Longhorns. So they've looked shaky, but I think they stood tall against Texas. I think they're able, even if it's just one turnover, I think they're able to get that in the first half. It is tough. Vaught Hemingway Stadium is a tough place to go. There were years, I remember in the mid-2000s, where Alabama went there and lost one. So this is definitely a ripe opportunity for an upset, but I do think Georgia has the pieces in place, the ability to create those turnovers like they did against Texas, and their ability to do pretty well against the pass, ranking 26 nationally. I'm going to go with Georgia 31 and Ole Miss 28. Now looking over a couple of other quick games, teams that are in the top 5 that I think have decent tests in front of them. You've got Florida going up against number 5 Texas. If DJ Lagway was healthy, I think this one would be a lot more interesting to watch, but I think Texas is able to handle the Gators and pick up a win as the Gators season continues to go through its toughest stretch. I think they have LSU and Ole Miss up next. Number 4 Miami at Georgia Tech. The Yellow Jackets gave Miami everything they could handle last year, and then a bad decision late by Mario Cristobal really handed a win to Georgia Tech and snatched defeat from the jaws of victory for the Hurricanes. And I think they were perfect going into that game last year, and that kind of sent them on a little bit of a tailspin to end the season. So this is an important one for the Hurricanes to win. They're still going to be in the driver's seat, even if they were to somehow drop this one. I think they do get the win, though. And it's not a big spread. I think they can win by a couple of touchdowns, so I think they do cover in this one as well. Now an interesting game, and the lead up to this one, the introduction is about the opposite of what you would have expected going into this season. You've got a struggling Michigan going up against the number 8 undefeated Indiana Hoosiers. Obviously last year, Michigan, the national champions, going into this one, you'd expect, Michigan, they're going into this one. Yes, we expected a step back from Michigan, but maybe not to this level. So we thought going into this one, into the season, that this would be a game where they have a tough road environment, but it's probably a win for the Wolverines. Now I think it's kind of the opposite. The Hoosiers were, I think, not horribly, but a little bit disrespected in the college football playoff rankings by the committee. This is one of their first chances to prove themselves. They obviously next week have their biggest test at Ohio State. I think Indiana, their offense has been really good all year. I think they only trailed briefly during that game against Michigan State, the first time they did this season, and then they rattled off 47 straight to win that one comfortably on the road. I think they're able to get a comfortable 38-17 win over Michigan, so that's my pick here. Then another interesting game in the ACC. Clemson is kind of on college football playoff life support, going on the road to Blacksburg, Virginia, to take on Virginia Tech. It's a tough game. It's a tough place to go and win. Lane Stadium. They've got a good quarterback in Kyron Drones. They've had an okay season, the Hokies have, but I do think Clemson gets back on track with this one. They're still looking at, with either Miami or SMU slipping up, a chance to make the ACC championship game, but their loss to Louisville last season and the way that both Miami and SMU are playing makes that road a lot more difficult. But they are still ranked. I think they're 23rd. So, at this point, though, they're going to need to win the ACC championship, and to do that, they're going to need to get a win here. I think they do. Finally, a very interesting and intriguing game in the Big 12. Number 20 Colorado at Texas Tech. This is the number 2 passing offense against the number 3 passing offense. Buffalo's number 2. Red Raiders number 3 in the Big 12 in passing yards per game. Colorado's defense has improved dramatically this year, gone from 34.8 points per game allowed to 22 this year. The Red Raiders also come back home to Lubbock with a lot of momentum, having spoiled Iowa State's perfect season last week. They're looking good. They're not just a team that kind of gives teams troubles. They're legitimately in the Big 12 race, especially if they're able to grab a win here. Colorado's 4-1 in conference. Texas Tech is 4-2 in conference. So obviously, you do the math there, you can see that a win, instead of being a half game behind Colorado, would put them a half game ahead of Colorado. And with only BYU undefeated in conference play, it would be a massive opportunity for the Red Raiders, especially holding that head-to-head already over Iowa State. If Kansas State can beat Iowa State in the regular season, I think it's the finale or the second to last game, then Texas Tech is in a legit shot to make the Big 12 championship. Now, with all that said, I do think Colorado, outside of the game at Nebraska, have done well on the road this season. I think they are a little bit stronger. They've improved in key areas this year. I think Texas Tech also ranks last in the Big 12 in sacks, which was an issue last year that Colorado has mainly amended this year. So I'm going to go with Colorado 34, Texas Tech 27. Finally, one other game just to wrap things up with, because of the rivalry aspect of it, kind of a game to watch as well, is BYU, who also, like Indiana, is a little bit lower maybe than they deserve. Going up against Utah in what is called the Holy War out there in Utah. It's an interesting matchup, but I think the Utes have grossly underperformed this season. Yeah, that's in part due to Cam Rising going out with an injury, but I think they just haven't looked good, even when he was able to play a little bit. I think the BYU gets a big win here over their rivals, stay perfect, and maybe even get a bump up in the college football playoff rankings with a good road win. But let me know your thoughts and your predictions for this week of college football. We're entering really into the home stretch now as we get into November. But that's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.